Okay, yeah, thank you, Jody. I would like to welcome the community. I just apologize for the delay. Again, we've had just a couple of little glitches here at the start of this new year. I'd like to welcome the community to General Finance of January the 6th, 2025. I'd also like to extend a New Year to everyone in the community. Hope you had a nice vacation, well rested, ready to go for 2025. But I'd also like to take this time to send our condolences to all those who have lost loved ones during this time. It's always a difficult time to lose one. And I would just like to just give a moment of silence for those that we lost during this time. Thank you very much. I'd like to proceed on just to see if there's any identification of any media that is attending this morning. I do not see anyone, but again, welcome. I'd just like to make just a quick announcement. I know that concerning business, council business, that there has always been some delays in our members trying to get their issues brought to council. We do apologize for that, and we'll be working on to expedite that process in the future for 2025. One of the other things too, I'd like to see if has any been any new additions or changes to the agenda. Does anyone have any new items? I have one, which is just an update. Okay, seeing or hearing none, could I have a mover to accept the agenda? Moved by Audrey, second by seconder. Oh, Carrie, sorry, Carrie, I didn't see you there, sorry. Second by Carrie, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Moving on, I know we do have a delegation presentation with Carlos and Matthew from KPMG Auditors. And of course, they're going to give us an auditor financial statement update. And are they in? We are just waiting for them to join us. Good morning. Good morning, Matthew and Carlos. Welcome to the General Finance meeting for January 6, 2025. I'm glad to see you guys again. And of course, Happy New Year to both of you. I know you have a presentation and an update for us and for the community this morning. So without further ado, the floor is yours. We can't hear you, Carlos. It's been one of those January 2025 mornings, Monday mornings. We've been having a few glitches of our own. So,
Hey, I will keep on talking.
Okay, there you
There
go.
we go.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Well, Happy New Year to all of you, and we are pleased to present, our update for the community on the 2024 audit, which would have been completed last year. We will walk through a couple different concepts. Number one being the results of the 2024 audit, some comments on our audit report that we issued, as well as making some commentary on management letter points and the improvement over time over the last several years up until 2024, and then some comments on a go-forward basis. So Matt and I will both go through the presentation, and certainly for all of you on council, for Chief Hill and members of council, Some of the concepts and some of the material will be consistent with what we would have presented when we did finalize the 2024 audited financial statements. But just for the greater community, we will walk through some of those items that we believe are significant enough and important to bring forward to your attention. So it is a long document, maybe just in terms of a sense of timing through you, the chair. Um, how long roughly would we have just to present, just to help us guide how much time we go through?
Carlos, is it possible you could do your overview in, say, 20 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you.
So Matt, just skipping forward a few slides, just in terms of audit highlights, we conducted our audit, in accordance with our professional standards. When we compare the approach that we took in 2024, it was largely consistent with the audit approach that we would have taken in 2023. There were no significant unusual transactions. In terms of adjustments, there was one adjustment, which was a late entry, but otherwise it was a relatively clean sheet for 2024. And I believe there was one reclassification entry between deferred revenue and accounts payable, which we will get into shortly. But overall, from our perspective as external auditors, it was a relatively clean audit in 2024 with a lower amount of adjustments as compared to what we would have seen in some of the previous years in the past. Moving forward in the report, we can skip over a few slides. So this was an important area. As auditors, we are always required to specifically respond to two risks. One is the risk of management override of control. That simply means the risk that your management team goes around the controls that are in place to do something that is not above board. We design certain audit procedures to respond to this risk, such as looking at manual journal entries and making sure that the business rationale of the journal entry makes sense with the operation that you run at Six Nations. We also examine, all of the supporting documentation and all of our audit procedures, and I can report to the community that on the topic of management override of controls and fraud, we did not detect anything that would be considered fraudulent or suspicious. And in addition, we did have our inquiries with Chief Hill and others on any matters that would be relevant. And again, there were no fraudulent findings that would have any impact on your consolidated financial statements and the audit report that we issued. The second item that we're always required to consider is the fraud risk associated with revenue recognition. This simply means this is the risk that management manipulates its revenues to achieve a desired result. In the case of Six Nations, the majority of your revenues come through very specific agreements with various funders. So from an audit standpoint, we are able to gather very solid and effective evidence on your revenues. So we don't necessarily treat it as a fraud risk, but through all of our revenue testing, again, I can report to the community that all of the transactions were appropriate, were above board, and nothing on the topic of fraud to bring forward to your attention. So a clean bill of health on those two pieces. The next few slides go into some of the audit detail in terms of some of the procedures that we would have performed on your major areas that you would see in your consolidated financial statements. Some of those major areas are tangible capital assets, operating expenses, accounts payable, revenues. So our plan is not to go through each and every one of these slides in any detail, but from an overall perspective, we do design audit procedures in each of these areas. We do implement a element of unpredictability where we do add new procedures that we would not have done before. We did note, a few observations in some of these areas. Maybe Matt, I'll let you speak to, items around deferred revenue, because that is obviously one of the areas that, from an audit standpoint, is a critical piece of the audit.
Sure. Thanks, Carlos. I do think it's worth highlighting in just a minute or two um, the procedures we do over deferred revenue. As Carlos said, that is an area we spend quite a bit of time on as part of your audit. And the reason for that is, again, because of the nature of the various funding agreements that flow cash to Six Nations each year. Many of those agreements have specific terms that stipulate certain expenses must be incurred before revenue can be recognized from a funding agreement. Some of the agreements also have terms that stipulate any unspent funds at the end of the fiscal period must be returned to the funder or approved to be deferred and consumed in a future period. And each agreement is very different with respect to those terms. So it's quite a bit of volume that we as auditors have to test and your management team has to account for in any given year. So what we do is we on a sample basis go through each agreement and we select a sample of expenses to make sure that they have been incurred and that the revenue that offsets those expenses has been recognized appropriately. And then any remainder, again, if it is unspent and to be returned or saved for the future, is recorded appropriately. We did have one reclassification adjustment as part of the audit this year for about $1.9 million. That was originally recorded as deferred revenue. However, it was based on the wording of the agreements, more appropriate to be recorded as accounts payable. So a little bit of a difference on where that sits on the balance sheet. There's no impact to net operating surplus because of that adjustment. So a little bit of geography on the balance sheet, but something that did come out of our testing there that is mentioned in our report here. I think that is profiled here in a little bit more detail. You can see on our slide, there's no change to income or to assets or equity. It's simply an offsetting increase and decrease to two different liability accounts, which is profiled here. And one small adjustment that was corrected in the financial statements. This is much smaller in quantum. This is just over $100,000. This was not normally something we would profile. It is not considered material to the audit, but because it was corrected during the audit process, we profiled it in our report. I won't go into a lot of detail here. This is one of the accounting entries to account for an investment in a subsidiary that Six Nations controls. Six Nations accounts for that with one accounting entry at the end of each fiscal period based on that subsidiary's numbers. And in the prior year, the subsidiary's numbers had changed when their audit was completed after Six Nations had made that entry. So just a little bit of housekeeping for a prior year entry, nothing that the management team could have known about at the time. So a small little adjustment after that became known in the current fiscal period.
Now, as part of our audit, we do document your processes, your controls, and we always have a heightened level of professional skepticism. And on an annual basis, we do produce a separate document called a management letter, which includes observations that we make during the course of our audit. We've, provided this letter, to council and to the community on an annual basis. What we've done in this presentation on page number 18 is profile some of those observations and insights that we've made as part of our audit process. Overall, we do see a good trend as it pertains to these management letter points. It may be difficult to read on the slide, but if you look at the chart at the bottom, it shows the number of management letter points go down. That is a positive. I do make comments that, the control environment and strengthening your processes, your controls, it's a journey. There is no endpoint, but it's important to see continued improvement. If I look back, over the past 4 years specifically, obviously you have the COVID pandemic impact, the administration building, lockout, different external events, that have impacted your processes, controls, obviously employee turnover, management turnover. That's also something that the organization has to deal with. But over time, we have seen that improvement. We do believe that there is still improvement to be done. So the journey is not over. And we do think that specifically over the next 2 years, if we collectively work together to continue to tighten the processes, that will help the organization as a whole in a couple different ways. It'll help the organization in terms of accelerating when the audits are complete. It'll help accelerate and provide, the chief and council more information about unspent funds before the end of the year in the hopes that you can make changes in your decision making to use up the funds that have been provided to you. And also in terms of employee engagement and employee retention, those are key areas that are also important in terms of ensuring you have a strong control environment, in having the appropriate number of people and the appropriate people with the right skill sets in key positions. All of those items are important to continue the trend line, so that hopefully in 1 or 2 years that all of those management letter points are fully addressed, implemented, and action plans are taken. So the moral of the story is you've come a long way in the last 4 years, still not done, a little bit more to go. We have included a bunch of appendices. I do like to comment to you as the community that Matt and I, we work for KPMG. So we as KPMG are independent. We are independent auditors. So we don't take our instructions for management. We have our professional rules that we need to follow in the conduct of our audit. We do ensure that we as KPMG do not provide any other services that would threaten our independence. So I can confirm with the community that we remained independent throughout the entire process, up including today. So we are a third party. We are external. For those of you who have read our auditor's report, which is included in the consolidated financial statements, it is labeled as independent auditor's report, and that is just really important for us to comment on. Moving further in the appendices, maybe one more, Matt. This is a letter that we have the management team of Six Nations sign off on. The consolidated financial statements of Six Nations are not ours. They are not KPMG's. They are yours. This letter does a great job, in my opinion, of outlining what are management's responsibilities, versus the responsibilities of the external auditor. And as part of our audit process, we did receive the signed management representation letter from management, which outlined that they understood their responsibilities and their role as it pertains to the financial statements. Moving along in the appendices, maybe to Appendix E. In terms of accounting changes, from year to year, there are changes both from an auditing standpoint in terms of how Matt and I conduct the audit from time to time. There are also accounting changes in terms of changes in the accounting standards. In the 2023 financial statements, there was a significant accounting change called asset retirement obligations. That was a significant change in the accounting standard. It was not an error. It was just a change in the rules that entities needed to follow, but that was done in 2023. In 2024, there were fewer changes from an auditing and accounting standpoint, and we're satisfied that your 2024 financial statements have all of the disclosures that they should have, and that one would expect to see in an audited financial statement. Moving along, Matt, maybe to Appendix G. We provide this, annually to Six Nations. It just provides some thought leadership. One of the items that we are seeing from, communities just like yours is offering support in terms of fraud prevention, lean process reviews, and I'll just hold the topic on cybersecurity until the next few slides, but that is also a very important topic that we will just briefly raise in this meeting. So Matt, we can turn over one more page. So just in terms of cybersecurity, just want to reiterate that in every council chamber, in every presentation, whether it's to a community or to other stakeholders, simply want to stress, continue to invest in defending against cybersecurity. Continue to evolve your processes and your controls. The impacts of cybersecurity are increasing in terms of cost and disruption. So my message here is continue to do all the good things that you do, but continue to increase the investments that you make. Employee training is critical, to ensure that employees do not click on those emails that they should not. It's just such a big topic. It would be remiss if I didn't mention it. We have provided a few slides on cybersecurity as part of this presentation. Again, my message today is not to go through each of these line points in any detail. It's just to stress the level of importance. You can never eliminate the risk, but we all need to collectively reduce it to an acceptably low level. And we have received comments from council and management that they are investing in this area. They are conducting various, IT tests and employee training, which is great to hear as an auditor. Just keep up the good work and continue to invest in that area. Moving along, Matt. This now maybe just if you can go back one page, Matt. So just for the purposes of the community, we often get questions about understanding how to read a set of financial statements. We did previously perform a presentation approximately a year and a half ago on some slides that provide some insights in terms of how to read a set of financial statements. Often we get questions about, are you healthy from a financial standpoint? Or what does the balance sheet mean? What does the income statement mean? What does a cash flow statement mean? So we have included some slides from a previous presentation that we would have performed. Certainly, this document will be available, through Chief and Counsel and management. These slides compared 2022 and 2023. We could also update these to 2024 if needed, but it just goes through, again, some of those highlights about how to read a set of financial statements. My plan was not to go through these specific slides in any detail, but certainly, having accumulated surplus amounts is important. Having an annual surplus is important. Maybe, Matt, if I can ask for you to show on screen the consolidated 2024 financial statements. I would just like to make two observations before I turn it back over to the committee. The first observation is simply on our, on our audit report. So this is the audit report that I would have signed as part of the 2024 audit. This is a standard template that is used for government organizations. The key message here is that this is a unqualified report. What that means is that there are no issues, no reservations. It is a clean audit report. And Matt, if you skip over just to the date of the audit report.
We do have this one in draft. This would have been dated November 6th in final.
Got it. So November 6th, 2024, that would have been issued in final. Certainly, tied to the MLPs and the improvement points. We do expect to work closely with management on accelerating the timing, both of the main audit, but also accelerating the timing of the gas company to move towards a target of having an audit report date in the month of July, which would be considered to be a goal, a collective goal. Maybe, Matt, moving forward to the balance sheet. Again, all of the major captions that we would have audited, you can see on this page, all the way from your financial assets, liabilities, down to your accumulated surplus. One comment is that the accounting standards do continue to change. There currently are efforts to change the way a balance sheet looks, but that did not impact you in 2024, nor will it in 2025. But in a few years, the expectation is that the line net financial assets will disappear and that the balance sheet will be restructured. On the statement of operations, just want to highlight that you have your annual surplus, which is higher than 2023. Again, that's a positive. And the only other comment that I would like to make before I turn it over to the committee is that certainly from our standpoint, we are satisfied that the disclosures are complete and with the opinion that we issued in 2024. So with that, I would like to maybe pause there and turn it back over to the committee.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Carlos and Matt, for your presentation. One of the concerns that has popped up a few times, and you've addressed them, but just to clarify for the community's understanding, that there was always some questions about, especially this year, about delays with the audit. And of course, we know that you reviewed a lot of the reasons for them, being, of course, changing over to that new accounting standards, and also as well as one of the departments having some difficulty in getting their audits completed. I know you've expressed the fact that you're going to be working with us in terms of helping train some of our people in our departments to basically complete those audits at a timely fashion, And it's good to see that you're going to be working with tightening those processes. that will actually be able to really get this audit out to the public in a timely fashion. But I just wanted to make sure that if you had anything to add on terms of explaining the delay in this particular year that most likely won't happen in the future.
Yeah, and from a what you can control perspective, turnover is not your friend. So, if there's anything that can be done to reduce the amount of turnover, making sure that all of the employee vacancies are filled, those items go a long way in terms of helping the overall organization do what it needs to do at an appropriate time. Another one minor item would be, the gas company, just finding a way to ensure that the audit of the gas company is done in line with your expectations for finalizing the consolidated financial statement. So if that small audit needs to be moved up 2 months, then find a proactive way to ensure that that is done, so that is not an obstacle, to hold up the consolidated audit. Again, it's a small entity, but it is one of those items that needs to be moved up in terms of timing. And again, certainly the sooner that you can close your books and have specific departments, sign off earlier will go a long way. Again, there have been improvements in terms of the main pieces of the audit, over the last couple of years. Maybe Matt, I'll turn it over to you if you have any additional insights on that topic.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. I think that's a fair summary and certainly speaks to some things that are not necessarily within the management team's control. If 5 departments are on schedule, but the 6th department needs a little bit more help, that does slow down the audit because it is a consolidated financial statement. So all pieces need to be moving at the same pace in order to get to the finish line together. I think the natural gas company comment is fair. It seems a little bit silly, but a small piece can hold up signing off on the entire consolidated financial statement, because it is a material accounting entry that their audit needs to be complete before the management team here can book their entry for the consolidated statement. I do think those are the two biggest pieces.
Great, thank you very much, Carlos and Matt. The other comment too, that I think you had brought this up earlier about the growth of the organization in the last, I believe, 8 to 10 years, has grown quite. Am I incorrect in saying that it's grown almost doubled its size in, let's say, the last 10 years? But it has grown substantially, and with that, of course, these adjustments have to be made as an organization grows. And sometimes, like you were saying, being up to date on all of those new procedures will help us stay online and be actually getting the audit again done in a timely fashion. Is that a fair statement?
It is. It's great to see that growth, but with that growth comes growing pains. And you need to make sure that the back office, through the CFO's office, has the right resources and the right level of resources to be able to accommodate that growth. So you're dealing with much more volume today in terms of, the dollars, the funding agreements, the amount of activity that goes through your books and records compared to 10 years ago. So the question is, do you have enough resources in the back office to match that growth that you've seen as a community in the last, 5 to 10 years? So that would be my comment, just making sure that that you have a sufficiently sized and capable back office to meet the larger organization needs. And I can tell you, just in sharing my experience with other organizations, during the COVID era, so 2020, 2021, 2022, it was extremely difficult to bring in talent, to hire employees, to find the right employees. And that did set a lot of organizations back because they wanted to hire, they wanted to add those skill sets, but they were nowhere to be found. So hopefully, um, and what I'm hearing, from organizations is that there are more options in terms of employers finding talent and filling vacancies. So, cross our fingers that that would bode well for you as a community in terms of ensuring that you can fill those vacancies and ensure you have the right size of team given the size of organization that you now have in 2025.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? Cynthia?
Good morning, and thank you for your presentation, Carlos and Matthew, I do believe. And I think we just need to acknowledge the work that's been done by our management team and finance. Just hearing the report, yeah, we've got a ways to go, but there has been much done. I just think we need to recognize those efforts. And in that regard, going forward, of course, council is aware of our responsibility for oversight and to take heed to the management letter. I just wonder, in that regard, Jennifer, can we have an undertaking from you to come back to council and just a report? For example, one of the recommendation one was whatever it might be, and here's what we'll do to do our best to achieve that. That would be good for us in our role to have that.
Yes, thanks, Counselor. That's obviously as soon as we receive the management letter, we start making plans, but I'll formalize that into a report for council for sure.
Go ahead, follow up, Cynthia.
Yeah, and the second was in Carlos, when you were giving your narrative, you noted about these various efforts for improvement we need to make on the overall. And one of the things you said it might help is to alert council, alert our departments to funds that they have that they need to spend before the end of the fiscal so as not to return them. Like, we're very aware of that. But in that regard, did you observe um, council, the administration, not in receipt of funds until like the 11th hour? We hear often that's a plague upon us by our funders because they are often in the same situation as we are. That is, they get allocations from Treasury Board, and if they're not spent, then they're really scrutinized coming for the next fiscal. But have you observed that in the receipt of funds?
Yeah, from my perspective, my comments are more about what you can control. We are fully aware of, the communications from funders, at the 11th hour, the last 3 months. If I share with you, 40 years ago, um, when I think about Six Nations, even when you looked at the overall budgeting of Six Nations, that process left a lot to be desired. And so if I compare the 2020 budget process with today is much tighter, much quicker, so that you can actually have information earlier to make decisions. So my comment is all about if you can accelerate, pretty much all of your processes and turn data into information earlier, that will give all of you more time to be able to make those decisions and not have those decisions be made, in period 10, 11, and 12 when, it's pretty much too late. And yes, I will acknowledge that during COVID, for many of the programs, it was actually hard to spend the money. just because of the difficulties, whether it was supply chain or, being able to hire, the employees that you needed to hire. So some of those amounts, were left unspent. In many cases, they were able to be rolled forward into the following year. But my comment is more around what you can control, and just trying to accelerate. So I'm not suggesting that, you know, um, incorrect decisions were made that resulted in amounts having to be paid back. My comment is more on just trying to accelerate all of the processes so that you have a longer period of time to make the wise decisions that you need to make.
Great, thank you. Leslie, I have Leslie and then Audrey.
Hi, Carlos. Hi, Matthew. Thank you for your presentation today. I have a question. Has there ever been a time, like I know everything is good to shine a light on things that are good and working well, but has there been a time in Six Nations history in the past few years, specifically like let's say 2020 to now to present, where something wasn't submitted and yet the audit was presented as complete and final and signed off at any point in time?
Two comments. Number one, when we present our signed independent audit report, that means we are done the main consolidated audit. There are 35 to 45, I'm going to call them program audits, that are done for specific funders. Some of them can be compilation engagements, review engagements, or audit engagements. Some of those, there's still a backlog in terms of getting those issued and into the hands of funders. The turnover, specifically in 2020 and 2021, certainly was a significant issue, which resulted in some of that backlog growing. But I guess the positive is that, in the last few years, with the with Jennifer, that we're now able to sort of catch up and collectively get all of those reports in the hands of the funders. So we do expect that in 2025, that everything will be fully caught up and that you can finally, sort of move that page forward. But we are confident that every time we issue a consolidated audit report, that consolidated file is fully complete.
Great, thank you. I have Audrey.
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation. I'd just like to also congratulate Jennifer for a fine job again this year with her team, and I know it's tough. I know sometimes people get a little tough on you, so thank you for your, I guess, your fortitude to keep on going. My question is, do you have the resources that you need and enough of them for you to do your job? And if there is further resources you need, can you put that into the report? And we're talking about growing. So if it's, whether it's human resources or financial resources, thank you. I would appreciate you commenting on it and then put it in a report.
Thank you, Councillor, for your kind words, and it's definitely a team effort to pull all of this together. So thank you for recognizing my team as well. The short answer is no, we don't have enough resources. We don't have enough personnel. We don't have enough financial resources. We don't have enough physical resources such as space for our entire team to be able to facilitate us to properly collaborate and things like that. We make do with what we have, and obviously we are moving forward and doing things like that. The other resource that we're looking at, which has been on our docket for the last few years, is changing our software. By changing our software, it will enable us to be a lot more expedient in pulling all the information together and being able to give information a lot more quickly. It'd be a lot less of a laborious and manual process. Unfortunately, due to turnover in our staffing for the first couple of years, and then last year we took a back seat because payroll was doing their payroll software, so didn't think it was a good idea to do it at the same time as that. But once we can have the proper resources in place to confidently be able to undertake that software migration, I think that we'll be in a much better place, and then we'll have a better assessment of what further resources we may need, because right now we do lose a lot in the manual pulling of all of the reports and putting them together, that type of thing. So I will bring that in a full report for all of you to review as to what we need from a finance team perspective moving forward to support the growth that's already occurred, but also the future growth of the organization.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Audrey, follow up.
Thank you, and that's really good to hear. That's what I wanted to know, is what is holding us back? And you'll also be putting that report on how to get the programs getting their audit, their portion of their audit in on time, or maybe ahead of time, and giving them the training and support that they need in order to get that done. So that'll be really good. And then from year to year, we use that report as our milestone to keep checking on to see the growth of our financial system here at Six Nations. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Audrey, and thank you, Jennifer. There's no further questions. I need a mover to accept the presentation from KPMG. Moved by Audrey, second by Cynthia. All in favor? Any opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Melba. Question?
Yeah, thank you also for your presentation today. I've never had the answer over the years. We've had several chiefs that I've gone through, and now more than ever, we have presentations and requests for presentations at various locations across Ontario and otherwise. And it's my understanding from sitting on other boards that there's compensation at times. And I've never had the answer. Where is that shown in the audit of individuals receiving dollars for presentations and requests to be at certain meetings, for example, and saying a few words for various reasons? And I want to know, where is that found, so the community will also know? Perhaps around this table, everyone knows but me. But I've never seen it, and it's never been explained that I can recall where it's shown in the audit. Thanks.
Maybe through you, the chair, and maybe management will have a response as well. But from my standpoint, first, if I think about remuneration paid to chief and council, there are requirements to disclose the total amount of compensation and remuneration paid by member. If the question pertains to speaking fees or conference fees that are earned by individual employees of Six Nations, there are no specific disclosure requirements to disclose those payments specifically in the notes to the financial statements. But on the council piece, yes, there are disclosure requirements as it pertains to chief and council and their role as part of Six Nations.
Great, thanks. Jennifer, can you address that? Just
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to reiterate Carlos and what he was saying, the disclosure requirements. It is in one of the notes. I can't remember off the top of my head which note disclosure it is, but there's a note disclosure at the end of the financial statements that details remuneration for chief and council.
Great. Thank you. We're at the vote. I think it was moved by Audrey, seconded by Cynthia, about accepting the presentation to KPMG. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Well, thank you very much, Carlos and Matthew. for your presentation, and we look forward to working with you further as we move towards a more proficient and again a more comprehensive look at how we do our auditing and basically making sure that it is streamlined and again, as you said, always a clean audit. So thank you very much.
You're welcome and happy to help. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for your time.
Moving on to item number five on our general finance agenda, looking towards for the adoption of general finance minutes of December 16th, 2024. But before then, I have a comment or question from Amos.
Yeah,
And Audrey.
we tried to find the PowerPoint presentation on my computer, and it wasn't there, it wasn't in my computer. So can we have a copy sent or a hard copy
yeah, I just-
of that presentation?
Exactly. I just had earlier asked if Jennifer would provide us with that. I prefer a paper copy, but yeah, and then we could all get that whole overview
Yes.
of what
great.
was going on.
Yeah,
Audrey?
I was kind of lost at the presentation.
Thank you. In the new business there, in the last minutes, number 11, it says that I mentioned about an action plan coming back to the minutes process in council meetings. I asked also if it needs to be in a motion form. And this isn't the first time I've asked for it. We used to have it. It used to work quite well. And then for some reason it was disbanded. And I'm trying to get it back in there because it was a useful tool. So my question is, has it started? If not, then do I need to put a motion in to get it going?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. We have had preliminary discussions about what that would look like. Unfortunately, with the break, it's something that we need to pick up post-break. And we should have an update with you in the coming couple of weeks on what that looks like.
Okay, so I don't need a motion.
If and when you do, I'll let you know, but I don't believe so.
Yeah, well,
Hey, thank you for that. So do we have a mover to adopt the general finance minutes moved by Carrie?
I'll move with the question.
Go ahead.
Item 9 on the minutes. It says the chief is giving an update and letting the community know that Bill C-53 is not moving forward. Was it explained to the community that what Bill C-53 is? Was that part of the
Oh,
announcement?
that is the recognition for the Métis and the Métis rights moving forward in Canada. That was at a parliamentary level, and I believe that was defeated and will not be moving forward. That bill will not be moving forward. Is the way I understand it.
Yeah, I know what the bill is, but does the community know? Where was it explained to them in her announcement?
I think that's something that could be reiterated. I think she could put that in her next thing to make sure that it was more conveyed to the community as to exactly what that bill is, what it and how it pertains to us, and what the ramifications are moving forward. Elena and then Audrey.
Just wanted to let Carrie know that I believe there was a whole information campaign that went out from our communications about Bill C-53. So I don't know necessarily if she went into detail in her December 9th information, but there was a whole social media campaign that went out on our social media way back when it was when we were dealing with it.
Great, thank you for that, Elena. Audrey?
yeah, I think the point that Carrie's making, and I agree with it, is that we use too many acronyms without explaining what they mean. We just assume the community knows what we're talking about. And if they haven't heard those acronyms or terms used before, then basically it's not doing any good to help them comprehend what we're talking about. So point well taken, Carrie, I agree with it. And I did read the Turtle Island the other day, and Chief Hill did go on to talk about the Métis bill, and that it was not going forward. And that probably came from the reporter covering our last meeting when she spoke. Or maybe it was an interview, I don't know, but it was in one of the papers. So, but the acronyms, I think we all have to be careful of using them, and especially in our writing, and especially when we're dealing with the community. So, yeah.
Yeah, good point. Anytime I think that we reference a bill, whatever number it is that we also reference the actual name of the bill and what it represents. So, yeah, I think moving forward, that's a good point. Generally, and every time we move and we speak of a bill, that we would, yeah, clarify exactly what the bill is. Audrey?
I'm trying to get at the point of not just bills. When we're talking about other things, we use ministry name acronyms, we use program acronyms. And if they don't know what they mean, how do they know what we're talking about? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good example is we often say M&R with harvesting rights and of course the Ministry of Natural Resources. So yes, good point. Thank you. We have, Carrie has moved for the adoption of the general minutes, finance minutes of December 16th. Could I have a seconder? Second by Leslie. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, motion is carried. Moving on to number 6, the renewal contract for the primary public safety answering services program. That's recommendation 6.1. I have a comment or question from Cynthia.
Yeah, it does say, I recall, remember, but just before the break, we passed this and it says to rescind. What was the error?
There's a change in the contract. So what you had voted for in December was for a 5-year contract. This is changing the terms of that to an indefinite contract with 180 days of notice of termination.
Great. So I would go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah,
And then Elena.
the only question I had on that was the costing. Because in the previous motion, it was 7,200 for 5 years. And this one doesn't have a cost on it. I mean, I know it's indefinite, so is it?
Go ahead, Elena.
That was going to be my question, like when does the cost increase? Because as we know, all costs increase. I know that the dispatchers and rightly so are paid very well. But also was there a reason given for this change, why they wanted to make this change?
Becky, can you address that question? Thank you.
For the change in the term from 5 years to indefinite?
Yes.
No, there wasn't one. I'm assuming it's because the contract now includes the new, what is called Next Generation 911, which is mandated by the FCC. And then, because the previous contract we had, the previous last 2 contracts were 5 years. When we first started doing it, it was 2-year contract, every 2 years for like the first 10 years. And then the last 10 years have been 5-year contracts. Now this one changed along with the change for Next Generation 911 platform.
But is there a further adjustment to the amount of funding?
No, the amount hasn't changed in years either, but it's supposed to be based on population. So when we first started it for the first 10 years or so, it was like 6,000 and something, and then they increased it a bit, but basically based on population, which brought it to the 7,000. So it increases a little bit, but not much. But
So
basically,
is there-
the formula is supposed to be based on population.
So is there a mechanism to whereby we update that population number to them?
Yes, they generally ask for a updated population every couple of years or so.
Great, thank you. Amos?
Yeah, I think it's around the same lines. So is the agreement indexed by the year, each year, or by population? Oh, sorry.
By population.
Okay. In like COLA and things like that, like cost of living? Is it indexed along that, or you say it's population, right? Okay.
Great, thank you. For the community, I would like to read out the recommendation before we move on it. The recommendation 6.1 states that the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council approves to rescind resolution GF number 185/12/16 to 2024 regarding the 9/11 primary public safety answering point services agreement with Ontario Provincial Police to amend the term of the agreement. Could I have a mover to rescind that motion? Moved by Cynthia, seconder by Melba. All in favor? With a question?
Yeah, could we add that it's moved from a 5-year to indefinite in this resolution?
It's in 6.2.
Oh.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, motion is carried. Moving on to recommendation 6.2. This is the change, and I'll read it out. Whereas the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council has awarded primary public safety answering point services to the Ontario Provincial Police for the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory since 2001. And the second whereas is the renewal of the contract for the primary public safety answering point services with OPP is required to continue services for the period beginning January 25th for an indefinite term with 180 days notice of termination. And therefore, be it resolved that the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council approves to sign a band council resolution and authorize Chief Sherilyn Hill to sign the Ontario Provincial Police Agreement for the provision of 9/11 primary public safety answering point services for the period beginning January 1st, 2025. Could I have a mover for that recommendation? Moved by Audrey, seconder by Amos. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, the motion is carried. Moving on to the recommendation 6.3, that the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council approves to waive second reading on recommendation 6.1 and 6.2. Moved by Audrey, second by Amos. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you, Council, for that. Moving on to number 7, Indigenous Services Comprehensive Funding Agreement. It's amendment number 150, recommendation 7.1. And I would like to have Jennifer address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendation 7.1 reads, whereas Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council has entered into a 5-year comprehensive funding agreement with Indigenous Services Canada, and whereas comprehensive funding agreement number 150 has been received for council approval and signatures, therefore be it resolved that the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council approve and sign the following comprehensive funding agreement amendment number 150 for fiscal year 2024-25 between His Majesty the King and the Right of Canada, as represented by the Minister of Indigenous Services, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. Amendment includes additional funding for the following departments, programs, or projects: public health, promotion and disease, mental wellness program retention incentive in the amount of $20,000.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Could I have a mover? Moved by Amos, a seconder by Melba. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, motion is carried. Motion now to waive second reading. Motion by Amos, second by Melba. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, the motion is carried. Moving on now, this is just a new business. There was just one item. That was just an update on what's coming up in January for the community. I know the chief and the delegation will be traveling to Akwesasne, I believe next week for the Iroquois Caucus strategy session, as well as the following week there will be the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association meeting. I believe there will be some meetings set up with certain ministers during that week as well. And of course, we will get back to community on a report to that to those meetings and what has come about it and what has affects the Six Nations of the Grand River. So that was just the new business, was just more or less an update for the community of what's going to be going on in January. I just need someone to motion to adjourn. Oh, question, Audrey? Yes, they have been motioned. They have been approved. We would have to check that. Go ahead, Cynthia.
For the Akwesasne, it's the strategy meeting. It's with the Iroquois caucus. It's from January the 15th to the 17th. And there was a council motion authorizing Chief Sherry Lynn, Greg, Dean, and myself, and Leslie.
Right.
Oh, and Amos. Sorry, left you out there. Sorry, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for that, as well as for the ROMA, the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association. I believe the chief, Dean, myself, Cynthia will be the delegation attending that one as well. And I believe that starts on January the 20th, I believe, 19th. I believe it's a Sunday, 19th for 4 days. So, yeah, thank you for that. Could I have a motion to adjourn and move on to the in-camera session? Just one question prior to adjourning. I have Leslie.
Yeah, in health, there's a meeting, mental health at Blue Mountain, and it has not been. It's going to come up soon. I don't know if we're having another meeting prior to that.
Is that available to the community?
That's available to the health services.
To health services. Okay, thank you. We could update the community on that. Thank you. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Carrie, second by Melba. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. So thank you very much, community, for attending. I know we had a bit of a slow start this morning, but few certain glitches that keep popping up, and we're looking to rectify those for moving forward. So thanks again, Nyawa. All the best to everyone, and hopefully we can have a good start to 2025 and keep progress moving forward. So thank you very much.